It's the evening of Sunday, January 11th, 2009, and the pitch-black sky over Alabama is eerily quiet. High above the clouds, a private six-passenger jet is cruising steadily. But suddenly, the silence is shattered by a frantic, terrifying distress call to the Atlanta Air Route Traffic Control Center. The pilot? A 38-year-old man named Marcus Schrenker. He radios in absolute panic. He screams over the channel that his windshield has just completely shattered. He tells the controllers that his cockpit is rapidly depressurizing, and he explicitly says that he's bleeding profusely from his face. A man desperate in his final moments, losing consciousness right in the sky, and then the radio cuts to dead static.
Honestly, what a terrifying thing to hear. But I'm curious about the altitude of the plane. I mean, are we talking 30,000 feet or like 1,000 feet? Because if a windshield implodes at a high altitude, I mean, that pressure change alone, it could knock you out. Not to mention the physical trauma of being hit by the glass at hundreds of miles per hour. So I'm kind of thinking he wasn't at an extreme altitude, but either way, it's terrifying nonetheless.
Right. So he was at approximately at an altitude of 2,000 feet. And from what I could find, the cabin, it wouldn't have been heavily pressurized. So it's not like he would have been violently sucked out of the plane compared to if he were as high up as 30,000 feet into the air.
It makes sense because he was able to reach out to air traffic control.
Yeah, and he probably wouldn't have been able to even act if he were at 30,000 feet in the air. So the air traffic controllers, they desperately tried to connect with him again. N428 DC, do you copy? Nothing. Just silence. The pilot is now unresponsive on an uncontrollable aircraft.
By going silent, the controllers believed that he had lost consciousness and was bleeding to death at the controls.
But what they didn't know yet is that this horrific aviation tragedy is actually the beginning of one of the most bizarre and elaborate criminal manhunts in American history. Let's toss the salad on this one. I'm Ashley.
I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad.
So, if you met 38-year-old Marcus Schrenker from the outside, you would think he was someone who had it all completely figured out.
He was married to a woman named Michelle, and together they lived just outside of Indianapolis in an extremely affluent, exclusive neighborhood situated on Geist Reservoir. The locals actually nicknamed their specific waterfront area Cocktail Cove.
That's a pretty nice name. That sounds like somewhere I want to be.
Yeah. Sounds like the party spot. This was the spot where all the wealthy boaters, athletes, socialites, they would dock their boats and they would throw massive weekend parties on the water.
It doesn't sound like the place for us, but Geist is a very well-known, highly sought-after area in Indiana. We're talking serious money here.
The cream of the crop. And Marcus didn't just want to buy a house on the market. He specifically sought out a vacant waterfront lot right in the heart of Cocktail Cove so that he could custom build his dream home from the ground up.
Right. He wanted a physical monument to his wealth. So they custom built this massive 10,000 square foot French chateau style waterfront mansion that was valued at well over $4 million. They had multiple private boat docks, a gorgeous swimming pool overlooking the reservoir, and a driveway constantly filled with luxury cars. Over the years, Marcus owned multiple Porsches, a Lexus, and even owned 2 airplanes, one including the airplane that crashed, the Piper Malibu Meridian. And just to put it into perspective, a Piper Meridian around the year of 2009 retailed for anywhere between $1.3 million and $1.5 million brand new. Marcus's specific plane was a 2002 model that he financed a few years later. Even used, it was still worth well over $800,000.
Now you may be curious as to how they got to this point. The married couple met in college. They were college sweethearts. And they met back when they were students at Purdue University.
Yeah, Marcus went to Purdue specifically to study finance. He knew exactly what he wanted to do and started working on getting his state insurance and investment advising licenses right away. And Michelle was right there with him studying business.
Exactly. And when they got out of college, they didn't just settle into quiet corporate 9 to 5s. Marcus started out doing standard financial consulting, but he quickly realized that he hated working for someone else. He wanted to be the boss.
And Michelle didn't just sit on the sidelines either. When Marcus launched his own independent firms, she actively worked alongside him and even eventually became the chief financial officer, the CFO handling the books.
And their neighbors would describe them as the ultimate golden couple. Michelle was known as this beautiful, dedicated mother to their 3 young children. She stayed out of the neighborhood drama and completely supported Marcus as he built his financial empire from the ground up.
He actually ran 3 of his own independent firms, all headquartered out of the same corporate address. He was the owner and operator of Heritage Wealth Management, Heritage Insurance Services, and Icon Wealth Management.
So, as he continued to build his American dream, while doing all of that, he pursued his private pilot's license. Now, earning a private license requires hundreds of hours of legitimate flight training, passing written FAA exams, and passing check rides with an instructor. So, while it was a hobby, he was fully trained, licensed, and legally cleared to fly.
He viewed flying as a high adrenaline hobby and a status symbol. He often filmed his own high speed aerial stunts and posted them on YouTube to show off to his friends and clients. He had a reputation around Cocktail Cove as a bit of an aviation hotshot.
And as for his clients, he was incredibly strategic about who he threw his net out to. Being a pilot himself gave him the inside track, and it opened a lot of doors to network. He carved out a very specific high-end niche for himself, managing the retirement accounts for dozens of active and retired Delta Airlines pilots.
So, looking into this, we found that in 2006, Delta Airlines was going through bankruptcy and they tried to terminate their pilot pension plans. Now, Marcus saw this as an opportunity and swooped in, and he presented himself as this financial savior to them.
Which is textbook affinity fraud. You infiltrate a specific community, learn their language, and use their inherent trust of each other against them. According to court depositions, he convinced a group of panicked, retired pilots to let him help them fight Delta. And he actually formed a group with them and was supposed to testify on their behalf in federal court. But in true con man fashion, he bailed and was a no-show 2 days before the hearing.
But it didn't really matter because by then he already had their money. One retired pilot named David Smith later went on record and said he had a way about him. You kind of trusted the guy. He talked a good talk. So we entrusted him with a task that he never produced. He was running financial seminars for these pilots, taking them out to dinner, and treating them like they were family.
So he is a thrill seeker with deep pockets, living a luxury life. But the reality of how he was funding all of this was incredibly dark. Marcus wasn't a financial genius. He was a con artist. According to Indiana State Insurance Commissioner Jim Adderholt, Marcus was utilizing a surrender charges scheme. And to make matters worse, investigators later discovered that Marcus's state financial advisor's license had actually expired. He was completely unlicensed, operating rogue, and running a shell game with his clients' futures.
So let's break down how he actually did it. He was heavily dealing in something called annuities. In basic terms, an annuity is a long-term retirement contract. You hand an insurance company a large lump sum of cash, and in exchange, they guarantee to grow it and pay you a steady income when you retire.
Exactly. And because these are designed for retirement, it is meant to be a long-term commitment. The insurance company expects to hold your money for, say, like 7 to 10 years. And if you try to break that contract, you pull your cash out early, they slap you with a massive financial penalty called a surrender charge.
And these fees are no joke. If you put $100,000 into an annuity and tried to move it the very next year, you could get hit with an $8,000 penalty fee. You just surrender that money instantly. Which brings us to Marcus's brilliant, evil little scheme. As the middleman, Marcus would look at his clients' accounts and say, "Hey, this annuity that you have isn't performing well. Let's drop it and buy this brand new one."
But he was conveniently leaving out the fact that moving the money triggered those massive surrender charges for the client. And the client loses thousands of dollars in penalties. But Marcus, he didn't really care because the new insurance company was cutting him a massive, lucrative commission check just for bringing them a new client.
He would convince them and close his investors out of one annuity and move them to another, just purely to generate that commission. So that was his main way of bringing in money. But then he ups the ante and he created a completely fake investment opportunity called a foreign currency fund. It sounds fancy. It sounds good. Basically, he would take the client's life savings and put it into a completely fabricated fund. But here's the thing, that fund doesn't exist.
It makes you sick, especially knowing who he was targeting. One client was his own aunt. To think that he swindled people he personally knew, not to mention people who worked their entire lives to build their pensions. I mean, there was a 49-year-old airplane pilot from Atlanta named Charles Kinney, and he saw his elderly parents lose $135,000 of their $900,000 retirement fund purely to Marcus's fake fees. Kinney even told the press, "We've learned over time that he's a pathological liar. You don't believe a single word that comes out of his mouth."
Another investor named Bob Sellers handed over nearly $500,000. Sellers later went on record with a quote that perfectly summed up the devastation. "You haven't been bilked until you've been scammed by Marcus Schrenker."
And the most heartless one of them all for me is his Aunt Rita. She transferred more than $200,000 to one of Marcus's investment companies in August of 2008. And he also scammed one of his closest friends of 10 years, a man named Charles, out of $15,000, money that Charles had explicitly set aside for his 3 young children's college fund.
Which is just a heartless thing to do. He managed to keep this illusion alive for nearly a decade, but finally the walls started closing in. On December 30th, 2008, his wife Michelle officially filed for divorce after discovering he had a mistress. The very next day, New Year's Eve, Indiana State Police and financial regulators executed a massive raid on his waterfront mansion.
Yeah, investigators walked out with Schrenker's passports, over $6,000 in hidden cash, the title to a Lexus, 6 computers, and 9 massive plastic tubs filled with shredded financial documents. He was actively destroying evidence.
So by the time he gets into that plane a few days later in January, he's facing millions of dollars in restitution, total public humiliation, and the absolute certainty of a long federal prison sentence. So when the initial news broke that his plane had crashed in Florida, the people in Cocktail Cove were in shock. They thought a brilliant entrepreneur had just died in a horrific accident. But as federal investigators would soon find out, the only thing Marcus was a victim of was his own greed.
So the second the air traffic controllers in Atlanta hear that distress call, the screaming, the shattered windshield, the blood, and then nothing but dead radio static, they initiate a massive emergency response. Because right now they have a plane flying blind at cruising altitude, and they have to assume the pilot is unconscious or deceased at the controls.
Right, because we have an uncontrolled aircraft flying over populated areas. I mean, that is a massive threat. That is so dangerous. And they can't just wait and see where it drops. They have to figure this out, and they have to get eyes on it immediately.
Exactly. So the FFA immediately contacts the military, and 2 F-15 fighter jets from the 159th Fighter Wing of the Louisiana Air National Guard are deployed. These are highly trained pilots, Major Matt Rippin and Captain Josh Fogel, who are on 24-hour alert for Homeland Defense out of Belle Chase, Louisiana. They burn through the night sky to intercept Marcus's Piper Malibu Meridian.
And what an eerie mission that would be for those military pilots. They're pulling up alongside a civilian plane in pitch black, fully expecting to see a gruesome, tragic scene inside the cockpit.
Yeah, so they're expecting this really gruesome sight. And the F 15s locate the plane, which is still flying completely level at a high altitude, cruising right toward the Gulf of Mexico. The fighter jets pull up close, and the military pilot looks over into the civilian plane, and he's preparing for the absolute worst at this point. But when he looks inside the cockpit, it's dark.
So, what do you mean dark? I mean, it's dark outside, but are we talking like the instruments are dark, like the plane is off?
The cockpit is completely unlit. So the military pilot, he shines his light directly into the cabin to get a better look at Marcus. But there's no shattered glass from an imploded windshield. There's absolutely no blood sprayed across the dashboard. In fact, there is no pilot at all.
Who's flying the plane?
It's just on autopilot. So it's completely empty. He radios back to the command and reports this bizarre reality of what he is seeing. The windshield is perfectly intact, but the main cabin door is wide open and it's flapping in the wind.
So that dude jumped.
He had to have. Marcus didn't pass out. He didn't crash. He opened the door of his own plane, strapped on a parachute, and he jumped out into the freezing Alabama night.
That is crazy. So the entire Mayday call, the screaming, yelling, bleeding profusely, it was all just a theatrical performance for the air traffic control.
100% an act. He put the plane on autopilot, pointed it toward the Gulf of Mexico, and he bailed out. He fully intended for the plane to fly out over the open ocean and vanish into the deep water, taking his body and the evidence with it.
So he's faking his own death here. So where did the plane land? Did it land in water?
You would think, but it actually didn't. Marcus, he must have miscalculated the fuel load. The F-15 pilots, they shadowed the empty ghost ship over 200 miles as it drifted toward Florida, waiting for it to finally run out of gas. And it missed the Gulf of Mexico and instead plummeted out of the sky, crashing into a wooded, swampy bayou in Milton, Florida, which is a town in the Panhandle.
I'm kind of putting myself into his shoes here, but I'm guessing he thought if he jumped out of the plane, it would crash, the windshield would get broken anyways. Like all of these things, the fact that they actually flew, found the plane, and it's still flying, that's something you could never expect. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way he expected that to happen.
Definitely did not. Yeah, he was expecting this to crash into the ocean and they would never find it. And they're just like, well,
Yeah.
he must be in the ocean somewhere. It's it. Like, and something ate him.
It's insane to me. Okay, so the unpiloted plane, it drops out of the sky. I mean, that's incredibly dangerous. But did it hit anything? Like, where did it land?
By some absolute miracle, this aircraft crashed just 50 to 75 yards away from a residential neighborhood. And if it had drifted just a few more seconds, it would have wiped out multiple families' homes. No one on the ground was injured, but the plane was completely destroyed.
So now the authorities have an empty crash plane in Florida, an open cabin door, and a pilot who just literally dropped out of the sky somewhere over Alabama. And honestly, the financial fallout for the crash itself, I mean, that has to be massive. And of all places, I mean, a plane just crashed in Florida. Like, that's such a Florida thing to happen.
Yeah, like very bizarre. And could you imagine, like, who was in the plane? Nobody was in the plane. Like, was anyone hurt?
Right.
There wasn't anyone in the plane.
I think the only thing that could make it more of a Florida story is if an alligator was flying the plane.
Yeah, or if an alligator was there and they're like, well, I don't know, maybe the alligator ate him.
Or the airplane actually fell out of the sky and hit an alligator.
That would have been, yeah, that would have just put the icing right on the cake. Now, the Piper Malibu that he destroyed, it wasn't even fully his yet because he actually financed it by the Harley-Davidson Credit Corporation.
They do airplanes?
Supposedly they do. And he was eventually ordered to pay them over $860 $71,000 in restitution for the destroyed aircraft, plus another $34,000 directly to the U.S. Coast Guard to cover the cost of the massive search and rescue operation that he faked.
The ironic thing here is that if he did pay them back, the $871,000 or the $34,000, it would be coming from all of the people he conned. Like, that's not his money. That's con money.
It gets worse, trust me.
So the military, the Coast Guard, and local police realized that they aren't dealing with a rescue mission anymore. I think that's pretty obvious here.
Yeah.
They realized the golden boy of Cocktail Cove, he just staged one of the most reckless, elaborate fake deaths in modern history.
He did. It instantly shifts from an aviation tragedy into a federal fugitive manhunt. And when you look at the timeline, you realize that this wasn't like the sudden, heat of the moment panic attack, runaway. This escape was meticulously, coldly premeditated.
But it wasn't done to perfection. Like, there was a lot of things that could have went better. Like, one, he could have jumped out of the airplane and watched his airplane crash, right? He had no idea where that plane was, and go figure, it was still flying.
Yeah, he didn't think about how much fuel he was, supposed to put in it. He
Right.
must have topped it off.
Mm-hmm.
So just days before he took off from the airport in Indiana, he was quietly laying the groundwork to disappear. He had secured a fake identification card. He had packed heavy wads of cash that he had siphoned from his clients, and even traveled down to Harpersville, Alabama under a fake name, rented a local self-storage unit, and stashed a bright red Yamaha racing motorcycle, a laptop, dry clothes, all inside waiting for him.
Right. I think this is like a movie script moment, though. I mean, he had all of these things in a storage unit. Like, he jumps out of the plane, he travels down the road, he finds this storage unit that he has all of this stuff in. Like, I don't know. This dude, he thinks that he's like living in a movie. He thinks he's the star of this mastermind show, right?
He drops out of the sky right where he was supposed to get to that storage unit.
Yeah. Well, he dropped where he should have, but the airplane definitely didn't.
No, he didn't. He said, I don't know where it's going, but it's not my problem anymore. Yeah, it is your problem.
One thing I wonder, though, is, okay, so he's faking his own death, but what's he going to do? Is he just going to hide out? I guess he has money and all, but, like, wouldn't you go to, like, a foreign country? You have an airplane. You could have went to, like, Costa Rica or somewhere, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, he could have just fled.
Like, he's in Alabama.
Yeah, what are you going to do there? So let's talk about the actual jump. Marcus, he puts his Piper Malibu on autopilot. He opens the cabin door. He bails out into the pitch black sky at around 2,000 feet. He parachutes down into the freezing, swampy woods near a small town called Harpersville, Alabama. It's January, so the ground is frozen and it's wet. And he lands in the muck, getting completely soaked in the process.
And let's think about this. He jumped out of a plane in the dark, like over a swamp. This is extremely dangerous and honestly not something that even experienced skydivers would do. I mean, he could have easily, broken a leg, landed in deep water, or hung in a tree and froze to death. Any of those things.
Exactly. And it shows how desperate he was to escape. And he manages to even cut himself out of his parachute. He hikes his way out of the woods and he makes it to a local highway. And he eventually walks up to a brightly lit convenience store in Harpersville, dripping wet from the knees down, covered in mud, and wearing aviation goggles.
Aviation goggles? Isn't that a dead giveaway? Like, take that shit off.
Well,
how do you even begin to explain to the clerk or the police that you're wearing aviation goggles and you're all muddy and it's in the middle of the night?
Well, he did have an explanation. So he came up with a lie that was incredibly bizarre, but it actually worked. He told the locals and the responding Harpersville police officers that he had been in a horrific canoe accident. He claimed that he was out canoeing with friends. They all hit something in the dark. The canoe flipped, and he had to swim to shore. He said that the goggles were to protect his eyes from branches.
Okay. So, that kind of explains the aviation goggles. Still weird. But I think where he messed up here is he said that he was canoeing with friends because if there's an accident, now they got to go find friends,
Yeah, where
right?
are they? Where are they okay?
Right. They're going to quickly find out that this isn't a real story. So when the police did talk to him, though, did they try to ID him? Like, what would he even give them?
Yeah, they did. They actually ran his real Indiana driver's license. But because the state regulators in Indiana had literally just raided his house, there were no active federal warrants in the national database yet. His records came back completely clean. So the police officers, they decide to be helpful. They give the international fugitive a courtesy shuttle ride to a local motel in town so that he can get cleaned up, get some rest, and dry off.
Talk about hidden in plain sight. I mean, they literally gave Marcus a ride. Like, you can't make that up.
Right. But Marcus, he doesn't stay in that motel room very long. He pays the room in cash, and the second the police leave, he puts on the black cap and he runs right back into the woods. He heads straight to a local self-storage facility.
This is like some Catch Me If You Can type shit, like with Leonardo. I mean, he puts on the cap and he just kind of disappears to this storage unit where he had everything, stored for his getaway. It was a getaway kit.
Yeah, just waiting for him there. And he rolls up the metal door of the unit that he rented just days prior under a fake name. He changes into his dry clothes, straps on a black motorcycle helmet, hops on the bright red Yamaha, and he speeds off into the night, heading south toward the Florida Panhandle. His plan worked. He's basically a ghost.
But the problem is he hasn't fully vanished yet because the plane eventually crashes and the military confirms he isn't inside it.
Right. And by the time the sun comes up the next morning, the Harpersville police, they see the national news reports about a missing Indiana financer whose plane crashed in Florida. Can you imagine that? Like them sitting there, like drinking their coffee.
He spits it out.
Like, are you serious? That was the guy we just took to the motel. He had aviation goggles on.
Oh, shit. We can't tell anybody. We gave that dude a ride.
Yeah, so they realize that canoe guy they gave a ride to is Marcus Schrenker. The U.S. Marshals are now called in and a massive federal manhunt is launched. And Marcus's mugshot is plastered across every television screen in the country. The walls are closing in for a second time. So Marcus thinks he's out free. He's like riding on his motorcycle down through the deep south, and he eventually pulls into a KOA campground in Quincy, Florida. He pays for cash for a tent site. He buys some firewood, 6-pack of beer, and he uses a fake name.
I mean, he probably feels like he got away with it at this point. I mean, he literally dropped out of the sky and walked away.
He did, but his ego is ultimately what gets him caught. Instead of laying low and staying completely off the grid,
he's going off the high dive at the KOA.
Yeah. Marcus, he logs onto the campground's Wi-Fi network. And he sends an email to a friend who lives back in Indiana named Tom Britt. And in the email, he claims the crash was a misunderstanding. He blames a lack of oxygen for making him bail out. And he says that he fled because he was embarrassed. He ended the email by saying, "By the time you get this, I'll be gone."
I mean, you can't go on the run from the U.S. Marshals and then start sending emails from your personal account. I mean, that's fugitive 101 there.
Yeah, and his friend immediately hands the email over to the police, and the U.S. Marshals track the IP address right back to that specific KOA campground in Florida. By the afternoon of Tuesday, January 13th, just 2 days after he jumped out of the plane, the campground owners contact the local sheriff because they notice something deeply concerning. There is a large, dark red stain soaking through the flap of Marcus's tent. Authorities swarm the campground and they open the tent, and they find the golden boy of Cocktail Cove barely conscious. He had made a half-hearted attempt to slash his wrists and elbow, but paramedics were quickly able to control the bleeding. The grand escape, the staged plane crash, the secret motorcycle, all of it lasted less than 3 days. He was handcuffed to a hospital bed.
Wow, what a way to end. So all these people that he conned, Did he actually face the consequences for everything that he did to those clients?
Well, in the courtroom, it was intense. So during his federal sentencing, Marcus, he sobbed uncontrollably. He gave a rambling speech to the judge where he refused to take full accountability for the crash. He literally claimed that a divine force gently put the aircraft down in the swamp.
A divine force. I mean, he put that plane on autopilot and he jumped out. He seems delusional.
And the judge didn't buy it either. He didn't just get one sentence, he got hit twice. In federal court, he was sentenced to 51 months in prison and fined nearly $1 million just for intentionally destroying the plane and staging the fake distress call. Then the state of Indiana hit him with 10 consecutive years in prison for the massive securities fraud scheme.
Okay, so he spent some time behind bars. Where's he now?
So Marcus served his time, and he was officially released on parole by the Florida Department of Corrections in September of 2015, and he is currently a free man. But he walked out of prison into absolute financial ruin, with over $20 million in civil claims filed against him. And there was another major victim in all of this who was just left completely out to dry, and that was his wife, Michelle. She was living a nightmare. I mean, imagine finding your husband for over a decade. He had a mistress and you're filing divorce. And the very next morning, state police officers are kicking in your door and seizing your computers. And because she was listed as the CFO of his company, an Indiana judge officially sided with state regulators and completely froze Michelle's financial assets, placing everything into a court-appointed receivership.
Wow, so she loses her husband, discovers his secret life, and then instantly loses access to all of her money.
Yeah, and the children do too. And Michelle told reporters outside of the courthouse, quote, "I have done nothing wrong. The only thing my husband did was give me a glorified title in that company." But she was completely cut off from her finances while the national media camped on her lawn, broadcasting her husband's manhunt. She was stripped of the life that she thought she had built, judged by her affluent neighbors, and left to financially and emotionally fend for her 3 young kids while Marcus was sitting in a Florida jail cell.
And you also have the elderly clients, pilots, his Aunt Rita, and his friends who trusted him with their life savings, who lost hundreds of thousands of dollars and will never fully get that back.
Exactly. Marcus Schrenker wanted to fly away and disappear, but the only thing he really destroyed was the lives of everyone who trusted him.
Okay, so I have to ask, with over $20 million in civil claims filed against him, did the victims ever get any of that back?
Well, they did, but nowhere near what they actually lost, because the house, it was essentially a monument built with stolen money. An Indiana judge seized it almost immediately. 8 months after the crash, a court-appointed receiver sold the Cocktail Cove mansion. But even though it was valued at $4 million, it only sold at a massive loss for just $1.8 million.
Wow. But what about like all of his cars and the other plane?
They actually auctioned all of that off. Everything he owned was liquidated to put into a pool and to try to pay back his investors. But because he had blown so much of their life savings on his ridiculous daredevil lifestyle, most of the victims only got back pennies on the dollar.
Wow. Talk about a crazy case. And with that, I mean, that wraps up the Temu version of Wolf of Wall Street. Thank you all for coming.
We appreciate you so much for listening and tuning in every week to Crime Salad. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a review, and follow us on social media like our TikTok and Instagram. We will see you all next week with a brand new case.
Also, don't flame me. It's Temu.
I say Temu.
Me too, obviously.
Temu, same thing.
We only know because of the Super Bowl commercial anyways.
Right.
All right, stay safe out there.
Okay.